Thank you so much, Kimberly, and for the Business of Design Group for asking myself and Benjamin Moore to be part of the roster this year. I'm really excited. I haven't been to one of Kimberly's conferences, but I've been a huge fan of Kimberly's forever when I used to watch her on Design for Living, and I thought, what an amazing designer, what an amazing job. And so it's really wonderful to see how her business has grown and what she has done and how much she's giving back to people. So I'm really happy to be part of this. And I've been looking at the agenda and sort of following vicariously through Twitter what you guys have been up to the past 2 days. And it's been a really wonderful, jam-packed agenda with lots of heavy content. Like, I think you're going to go back and you're going to be bursting at the seams with all of this wonderful education and learning. So I'm kind of happy to be here as a little bit of a lighter topic at the end, now that you're 3/4 of the way through and you can sort of see the light at IDS now. So I'm going to talk to you about color, which, in saying that, I don't necessarily agree that it's as we sometimes hear, oh, it's sort of the fluff in the design world. We hear that a lot, and I actually think, and I'm sure a lot of you think, that it's actually one of the most powerful design elements that we can carry in our designer toolbox. So I just realized that I don't have a flicker. Am I able to? Okay, good. I like to have control of my flipping. Oh, this is really fancy. So I want to talk to you about color and just kind of share some of the insights that I have when I'm talking to homeowners and when I'm talking to design groups. And I'm just thrilled to be able to talk to my peers, you guys here in the design and decor industry. And I'm sure that we share some of the same issues talking about color. But what I do find that's so fascinating at the end of the day is how people are really afraid of color. We know that color is most important tool in our design box. We know that it's made up of so many things other than pigments. It's made up of science and art and psychology and emotion, which is the hardest one when we're dealing with clients. I know that I really thought, wow, my minor in psychology has come in way more handy than my art degree most of my career, because it's really that trying to negotiate with people and trying to understand what they're thinking and what they're seeing, because color is so subjective. And so wonderful for that reason. But again, it's this design element that there's so many angles to it, and there's so many things that I could talk to you about in half an hour, but what I really wanted to do is sort of go through Benjamin Moore's 2014 trend palette, which you all have in your bag, so feel free to pull it out because you'll see the real color as opposed to what's on screen. But through that, I wanted to go through some of the beautiful images and talk a little bit more about what sort of goes behind that and how we were approaching color for 2014. I think that three of the things that I get asked about the most over the past 17 odd years that I've been doing this job, which is really making me feel old right now. There's been a lot of the same questions. I think certainly there's a lot of myths that you probably get asked about all the time too, and it's like, oh, do I have to do this? Do I have to do my ceiling with flat paint? Do I have to, can I paint stucco? Can I do this? Can I do that? And at the end of the day, there's not really any rules when it comes to color, because every time you think there is one, you always see an example in a magazine somewhere or on a photo shoot where someone's broken those rules. And it looks fantastic. So it's one of those very versatile tools. But a lot of the things that we discuss a lot on CityLine especially, we get asked the same questions. And people are mystified by light. And I think for all of you in this industry, how many of you do color consultations, whether it's with oh yeah, everybody, pretty much. And you know, it's funny because sometimes when I ask designers that, they say, no, I don't really do the color consultation part of it. But really what you're doing, whether it's paint or you're looking at cabinets and you're looking at countertops, like a lot of it is that color is really that thread that kind of goes through all of those finishes. So in a lot of ways, we're dealing with color when we're not even thinking about it. It isn't always conscious. Whereas for that homeowner who's looking at 3,000 colors or different finishes on cabinets, and you're showing them your boards, and they don't know, they can't imagine. I think the best thing you can do for them, right, is show it in their space, because that's probably the number one thing I think that really mystifies people is how color can look. Why does it look different in the store than it does in my house? Why does my neighbor have the same color countertop and in my house it looks completely different? Why at 5 in the morning does it look different than it does at night? And a lot of those things seem pretty obvious to us, but it's amazing how alive color is and how you can help your customer, your client embrace that so that they can sort of understand that. So that's one of the things. Is light. And this is a great slide that I show in a lot of presentations, just showing so quickly how different the exact same paint color, and not just the paint color, I mean, look at the sofa, look at the linen on the lampshade. I mean, everything looks so different when it's in direct sunlight, when it's in incandescent light. So it's a really, and now that we have LEDs, I mean, it's so overwhelming. I recently changed all my kitchen lights to LEDs because my husband really wants to be efficient. And I tried one out, I'm like, oh, it's not bad, but I had all the other ones, and oh, it was so gray. So then I found there's actually a newer one that has a more warm color. So again, we changed them all, and I feel better of it. And I still have a few of my little halogens, I'm sorry, my little pendant lights, just to kind of warm up that space. But it's amazing how different the color feels in my space. So much so that I'm ready to repaint again. So he's wishing he didn't change those lights on me. And then, of course, sheen. And this is something that I think is becoming even more and more of, I shouldn't say an issue, because it's actually a positive thing if we turn it that way, but how color can look so different when it's on a different surface. A lot of designers are using high gloss finishes today, matte finishes. We're using them in different places because we know that sheen isn't just a functional finish. It isn't just a functional part of paint or as a texture or as a finish. It's actually aesthetic as well. And with the advances in paint technology, anybody used Aura? Sorry, I have to put my little plug in there for a second. Okay, because honestly, I really was not a big fan of water-based paint on doors and trim and that kind of thing until I started using Aura and feeling like it still has that feeling of a satin oil finish. So you can kind of start to play around, and then you can use the matte finish and get the scrubbability. So you're not sort of defined by what space and what function. And again, that's a real learning for people to understand that I don't have to use oil paint in my kitchen or in my bathroom. So those kinds of things are really interesting. And with sheen, again, just showing it's actually a really great example. If you can see it, it might actually be in the card. But the same color, Supernova, which is this rich, deep purple, on the door in a pearl finish, and then on the back wall, when you walk into the space, it's in matte, and the color looks totally different depending on how the light hits it, where it hits the sheen, where it reflects, and then where it almost more absorbs into the paint finish. So again, you can get some really interesting effects just by changing the sheen level and playing around with that. That's actually a really great shot. I'm going to show you mainly photographs from the houses that we photographed in the 2014 card. And just to give you a little heads up, coming in towards the end of February, we're going to be producing a larger book with all of the full photographs from the houses. So you just see little vignettes in there, but there were some really gorgeous houses with really amazing photography. And what we really wanted to do this year for our trends piece is to showcase how color really lives in space. And I think this will help you with your clients as well to look at a space and see, yeah, even the paint company's showing how it looks different from one to another. We're really kind of trying to, again, embrace that reality of how we live with color. The other thing I get asked about all the time, and I'm sure you do, whether you love it or hate it, is about trends. And I didn't catch all of it, but I saw on Twitter there was something about faux or trends or faux. What was that? That was your conversation. I was trying to follow it and see where it went, but then it looked like it was going to a pub night or something. So it ended with a pint. There you go. So I think I was asleep by then. But it's really interesting because I think it's such a hot topic, and it always has been, it always will. And I love to talk about trends, and I really actually love to showcase trend colors, but at the same time, I love to explain to people and help them through the process of bringing a trend in if it works for you, being comfortable with that, taking the idea of something when you're ready to do a project. Because I'm sure, if you're working with a client, they're not going to say, yes, I want to use Radiant Orchid. on my wall, but they might feel that they're inspired by that. I want to have a little bit of it here, there, and everywhere. So I'm going to show you the idea of light and how color is influenced by light by showing these rooms from our 2014 card. And again, these were photographed in real homes with real people in some cases. But again, so you can see the light. I'm going to stand here and read this just to give you an idea of where we're coming from for our message for 2014. Breathe. I need to take this advice right now. I've had too much coffee. Breathe. Summer, you need to help me with your yoga. Thank you. Just breathe. Forget the phones, the screens, and the email. Take inspiration from comfort and simplicity. Take a leap and reinvent what you know. Take a moment to exhale and come home to a breath of fresh air. So overall, that kind of sums it up. You know, we're really seeing that people are looking for something fresh. I love that I got here early enough to see Kobe's presentation, and I love Kobe's style, and I love her sense of color. And there's a fantastic example of how color is so powerful and how it can define a brand and how it can do so much of that. But we're really feeling that people we're never going to stop selling beige, Manchester tan, and cloud white. I mean, that's definitely a staple. But I'm really finding that people are wanting a little bit more color. And interestingly enough, we've seen so many stats about how, as I started earlier, color was so daunting. And when, actually, it was in a House and Home magazine article a few years ago. They did a survey with Canadians who are their readership and asked whether you're doing a project from $1,000 to $100,000, what is the most difficult part for you? What is the most agonizing? And almost 100% of them, I think it was 80%, said color. And that really stuck in my mind. And obviously, again, they're not just thinking about paint color. They're thinking about all those other choices that they have to make that color is kind of the thread. And then paint kind of comes in at the end and has to tie all of that together. So we're really looking at bringing color in that can be more of a neutral. It can still feel like a neutral. It doesn't have to be beige. It doesn't have to be gray. It doesn't have to be cream. So just overall, these are the 23 colors in our palette. So you can see that we've covered the gamut. There are some saturated colors, but overall, even in this light, you can really see that the colors are light. There's definitely a lightness about it. And I think that we are feeling we sort of feel a cooler side to the palette where we're trying to refresh things. We were talking about last year sort of a cleansing of the palette or palette. And I think that's still actually a really good analogy, how we're lightening things up. The blues, the greens, the lilacs, and where's the pink? And the pinks. These are colors that kind of have a real retro feel for some of us, and also it can be sort of an 80s feel, a 60s feel. And when I'm talking to people about trends, and you probably find this too, depending on where you are in your career and where you are as a person, I find for me that, you know what, I lived through the 80s. I've done the leg warmers, I've done the headbands, like I've done all that. I don't get excited about that anymore. So sometimes when I started seeing these pastels come into fashion a few years ago, I'm like, oh no, it's Miami Vice all over again, right? So, okay, good. There's a few of you here who remember that. But honestly, when I work with 20-year-olds, they think the 80s is the coolest. They're listening to the 80s music, which I still love. I kind of got stuck in the 80s, and every now and then my hair starts to grow back up again. But there's really, there's something about that time that, yes, I'm nostalgic about it. It was, you know, a teenager, it was fun. But I don't really want to go back there with decorating. I was kind of decorating in that era. So for me, I'm not going there. But when I look back on the 60s, which I didn't live through, that I find, like, you can look at that through rose-colored glasses. Everything must have been so much easier then. Mom was home, you know, the dinner was on the table. There was just this whole really beautiful Leave It to Beaver kind of feeling that, to me, that's what the 60s was all about. And I'm sure some of you might say that's not true. But again, that's how we sort of want to be nostalgic, and that's really where the trends come from. They want to take us back to a different time, to an era where we were, maybe we weren't, or an era that we remember really fondly.